Right now, there is a case going before the Supreme Court that is testing whether the good citizens of New York City, who through their elected representatives, through a democratic process, chose to say to gun owners in New York City, you may have a gun in your home for your own self-defense or for sport in your backyard or whatever it may be, or in your living room, but you may not carry that gun anywhere outside the city, through the city, unless you're going to one of 7 designated gun ranges in the city. That's it. And the folks who think that owning a gun is, an absolute right, like the right to have health care, the right to housing, or the right to a job. Oh, that's right. We don't have any of those rights in the United States. Well, anyhow, they think that this is a God-given right. Are saying, wait a minute, you're restricting our rights. One of those folks is Cam Edwards. He's the host of Cam & Company on NRA-TV. NRA-TV.com is the website. You can tweet him at Cam Edwards, C-A-M Edwards. It just like it sounds. Cam, welcome to the program.
Hey, thank you so much, Tom.
So here's what I don't get. Number one, it sounds to me like you're opposing democracy. You're saying the will of the people be damned. My gun is more important than that. And then secondly, we've got 34,000 people a year in the United States who are shot. And I just can't wrap my head around the idea that the profits of the NRA and the gun manufacturers that support the NRA are more important to Americans than the lives of 34,000 people. What am I missing here?
Okay, so we can talk about that, but I thought we were going to talk about the Supreme Court case, and actually...
Well, this is the Supreme Court. You're trying to say that you're trying to overturn a democratic process by use of the courts. Are you not?
Well, I'm not a party to the lawsuit, but yes, the plaintiffs are, in fact, trying to overturn a New York law. And just a reminder, Tom, that, yes, local control is very important, but the Supreme Court has already said in the McDonald case, which they came out with their opinion in 2010, that it's not just the federal government that cannot infringe on your right to keep and bear arms. State and local governments can't do that as well. So the question that is before the court right now is whether or not that law in New York violates not only the Second Amendment. This is sort of a three-pronged argument. So there's the Second Amendment argument. Then there's also a Commerce Clause argument. And then there's also a right to travel argument, because this law is unique to New York City. It's not just that the people of New York City decided, you know what, we want this law to be on the books. They're the only people in the United States that has decided we're going to require you as a legal gun owner, somebody who's already gone through the permitting process, somebody who's gone through the background checks, who's gone through character references, who could be denied for any reason or no reason whatsoever, but we've approved you. We're now going to require you to, let's say, leave that firearm in your unoccupied home while you go off to your weekend place in Woodstock.
This is a law that seems to be hitting the hardest people who have second homes.
No, not necessarily, because one of the plaintiffs here also is a resident of Staten Island. He has one home, but the nearest range to him would be outside of New York City, so he's not actually allowed to travel to his closest range, even though the city's argument is that there's a public safety benefit.
So the poor guy has to drive an extra 10 or 15 miles to go play with his gun.
Well, the argument by New York City is that this is somehow going to reduce road rage by having an unloaded, locked-up firearm with your ammunition stored separately. That's how these firearms have to be transported. We're not talking about carrying firearms for self-defense. We're talking about transporting a firearm. The same way that you transport a firearm when you go to the airport and you put your checked luggage on an airplane, the city of New York says that's not good enough. We don't trust you. We think
so my original question, Cam, we're talking to Cam Edwards of NRA-TV. My original question, just very straightforward. 34,000 people a year being shot in the United States to protect the profits of this industry, and then this industry saying, wait a minute, you may want to have rights like, the right to have health care if you get shot, but we're not going to help you with that. We're not going to advocate for that. You might have the right to have a home, but actually, we're not going to support that. You may have the right to a job. No, we're not going to support that. But you do have a right to a gun and to carry a gun around. This seems to me like and we're going to defy the will of the people of New York City who voted for this, who voted for the elected representatives who passed this. This seems to me like the most bizarre perversion of a value system in my lifetime. I'm just shocked by it. All
right, let me try to brush away the strawman that you've created here, and I'll try to get to my answer. So first of all, let's talk about the number of firearm victims that we have in this country, which is down, Tom, by about 50% since the early 1990s. Now, gun ownership in the United States, we now have more than 300 million private.
You're talking
firearms.
about crime, not people being shot, because if you include accidental shootings and you include suicides in those numbers, the numbers have actually gone up since the 90s.
Accidental shootings have dropped since the early 1990s. Suicides by firearm have gone up, but suicides by means other than firearm have actually increased at a greater rate. So this is not a gun issue. You want to talk about a mental health issue?
I still think it's a gun issue. People, if you look at Australia, when they essentially made it very difficult to own a gun and dialed back the number of guns in circulation, they immediately saw a 14% drop in suicides. Over a number of years, it's been an almost 50% drop because somebody's depressed.
You know what the drop was before that gun ban went into effect, Tom?
I don't.
Interesting. Okay.
To the best of my knowledge, there was no drop. The simple reality is if somebody is depressed and they're contemplating suicide, if they're going to have to go through a whole lot of hassle and it's going to be very painful.
What does this have to do with the question before the court? Because the question before the court is not whether or not you should be able to own a gun. The court has answered that question. So what does this have to do with the question that's before the court?
Well, the court has not. Okay, very simply, Cam, the court has not specified that this is an unlimited right, the right to own a gun. It is a right that can be constrained in a reasonable fashion by state, local, and federal governments, as you know.
So you think it would be reasonable to require a gun owner, regardless of whether or not they live in New York City, anywhere in the country, that they could not remove that firearm that they legally own from their home unless they're going to a pre-approved range? I think
it depends on where you lived. I lived in Vermont for 10 years, and there's virtually no gun laws in Vermont. There's really no problem with that. People get it. But in New York City, it's a whole different thing. And I'm a fan of democracy, small d democracy, and a small r republic. And I believe, I agree with Thomas Jefferson that the people themselves should be the source of all law or most law. And that when the people of New York City say this is how we want to conduct ourselves relative to guns, and historically the Supreme Court has said this is not an unlimited right, it is a right that can be constrained, within a whole bunch of different contexts. It just seems reasonable to me to say, what's wrong with democracy?
Well, I got to tell you, Tom, I'm coming to you from Virginia today, and for a good portion of the 19th and 20th centuries, in the name of democracy, we saw an awful lot of people have their constitutional rights denied. So the argument that this is simply democracy doesn't fly with me, because democracy can still infringe on individual rights, and that's the question before the court. Now, you may not like the right that we're talking about. You may not even think that it's a right. By the way, you would be surprised if you would actually look at gun owners as individuals instead of the elaborately constructed straw man, that there are gun owners that believe in universal health care. I don't. There are gun owners that believe in, a guaranteed job. I don't. But you just didn't acknowledge that because you. No,
I'm talking about
you made
it
seem like the only
the NRA, basically,
who were in favor of this lawsuit were the gun industry, not gun owners, the gun industry. We're talking about individuals who have brought this suit, Tom. And again, you may not like this right, but it is a real right. It does apply to all Americans.
I think, Cam, to always say, we once had slavery in America. Cam?
The individual, that your rights somehow don't extend beyond these city borders.
Yeah. Cam, to go to, and I've had people do this before, to say, oh, well, democracy is all well and good, but it brought us slavery, therefore we shouldn't have democracy. Are you proposing instead that the NRA should be making our laws?
We have a legislative process.
Well, that's democracy. But you're arguing that legislative process should be overturned by the courts.
Of course not, Tom. Again, I don't know why you're having me on if you just want to put words in my mouth. What I'm suggesting,
I'm trying to understand,
is that, okay, so we don't have nationwide a democracy. We have a republic, right?
Well, we have both, actually, and the two words were largely interchangeable.
You know how bills get made. Bills get made. Both sides lobby. Michael Bloomberg spent $100 million on campaigns last year trying to get candidates in office who will support his anti-gun bills. We've got bills actually coming up in New Mexico right now, universal background check. So both sides lobby. Okay. But so,
Cam, will you join me in trying to put an end to that?
No, I don't have a problem with both sides.
You don't have a problem with people buying political. Oh, geez. Okay.
Okay. So once the bill has become a law, that bill can then be challenged, right? That law can now be challenged, which is what's happening here. So if you're talking about this being some sort of a challenge to democracy, I'd say that you're arguing against checks and balances.
I am simply saying that the two things. I'll go back to them again. It seems to me that the lives of 34,000 Americans a year is more important than the profits of the NRA and their gun manufacturer supporters, and that if the citizens of New York want to have a very restrictive gun laws, they should have the right to do that.
Okay, and that's your opinion, and I'm sure there might even be, hopefully not 5 justices on the Supreme Court that would take your side. I'm hoping that, there's no more than 4. But you may very well find justices that would agree with you on that.
Well, we'll find out.
I think that...
We'll find out how it shakes out. Cam, we're out of time. Cam Edwards, his show is Cam and Company on NRA-TV. You can find that on the web at NRA-TV.com. His Twitter handle is Cam Edwards. Cam, thanks for dropping by.
You bet. Thank you.
Good talking with you. We'll be back.